Today, on How-Tos and Reviews with Booze, we'll be showing you how to flush and bleed your brake system, so that you too can do it yourself.
This is the master cylinder of a 1998 Toyota 4Runner. And this is some old, dirty brake fluid that desperately needs to be changed. And to do this, we're going to need some brake fluid, and I purchased some .3, as you can see right there, which is exactly what the owner's manual calls for. Make sure to read your owner's manual and get exactly what your car specifies it needs. We have a wrench right here. Now, you can see this is just your standard wrench that will fit the bleeder valve, but what I would really recommend is that you get a flare nut wrench because it has more points of contact and it is less likely that you will strip the nut on the bleeder valve, and obviously that's not something that you want to destroy as your brakes are really important. Right here we have a clear little hose that we're going to be hooking up to the bleeder valve to change the old fluid out, and you're going to need something to drain that into. And as always, we're going to be pairing this with a little bit of booze, and today we are breaking out the bourbon. So this is the remainder of a bottle of Basil Hayden's that I've been really reluctant to finish over the past couple of months because it's just delightful. I personally think it's one of my favorite bourbons. They describe it as artfully aged in Kentucky hillside rack houses, then bottled at a smooth 80 proof. Basil Hayden's sophisticated taste remains true to the old family recipe. With more rye than a traditional bourbon, and in its trademark spicy finish, it's easy to enjoy Basil Hayden's any way you like. And today we're going to enjoy it while changing our brake fluid. So as a little visual here, you basically have your master cylinder, which is where all your brake fluid is going to be going into. You're going to have some lines that go to your anti-lock brake control, and then that is basically going to send the brake fluid out to all of the different brakes on the car. So you have your driver front tire, passenger front tire, driver rear tire, passenger rear tire, and pardon the crude drawing. Basically what you want to do is bleed out the brakes or replace the fluid in the brakes where the brake line is the longest, then the second longest, then the third longest, then the shortest. So because the master cylinder is closest to that front tire, that's going to be the last one to have the fluid replaced. The passenger front tire is going to be the second to last. Rear driver is going to be the third to last, and the passenger rear is going to be the very first one that you do. Of course, I described that completely backwards. Thank you to Basil Hayden's. And to show you what that looks like in real life, we got your master cylinder, the lines going down, up and across the firewall, into the anti-lock brake control, and then they go down to their respective tires from there. First, you want to open up the master cylinder and get out as much of the old fluid as you can. A lot of people will use an old turkey baster, but if you have any one of those like little suction pump handheld things, that will certainly work as well. If you don't have any of those tools, it's not a big deal. It's just going to take a little bit longer to drain out all of the fluid because all of this is going to need to cycle through the system as well. But if you can get some of that out first, it would definitely be beneficial. Then you're going to want to replace how much you took out with the new fresh fluid. And you can see the old fluid is pretty dark and nasty, and the new fluid, when it's pouring out, you'll see is pretty much crystal clear. One of the benefits of draining out some of that fluid first is that it's going to give us something to place the end of our tube into in our cup. And what I'm going to do is actually feed this up through the top of it and have that heavier piece stay in there to make sure that it always is submerged in the old brake fluid. And the reason we're doing that is to basically create a sort of airlock within that system, because it's going to be a one-man brake fluid change, and I'll kind of tell you the difference between doing it with 2 people and 1 person. But with this particular setup, now I can hook this other end up to the bleeder valve, drain all the fluid out, and not have to worry about air getting back into the system. So here we are at the rear drum brake, the rear passenger drum brake, and you can see the brake line actually coming into the brake right there, and that is the bleeder valve. Now typically these bleeder valves will have a little rubber nipple that goes over it just to protect it, and I had already taken that off and applied a little bit of PB Blaster just to make it that much easier to break that nut free when the time came. Now we're just going to attach the other end of that plastic tubing right there, and we are ready to open up that nut. And now we've got the tube hooked up, going all the way down and back into the cup with the old brake fluid that we drained out of the master cylinder. Now if you're doing this with 2 people, what you're going to do is get 1 person in the driver's seat and have them pump up the brakes until the pedal becomes really stiff. Once that happens, they'll signal to you, basically just yell out, hey, open up the bleeder valve, and at that point you would open up the bleeder valve and let the old brake fluid come out. As soon as the intensity with which it's coming out sort of slows down, then you would reclose the bleeder valve, your partner would pump the brakes back up again until they become tight, and then rinse and repeat until essentially fresh brake fluid starts coming out of this and you don't see any more of the old nasty fluid coming out. Now with 1 person, if you have it set up like this, where you have that gas lock that I was telling you about, you really don't need the second person to be there. You can just open up that valve and you don't have to worry about any of the air coming back into the system, because it would need to get sucked up through that old brake fluid. Now, even if that old brake fluid did go back in for some reason, it's not going to be the end of the world. It's a lot better than any air getting in the system. And now we can open the bleeder valve. And I actually opted to use the other side of my wrench because it was a little bit more secure on the nut of the bleeder valve, and I really didn't want to strip it with the other side. So I took off the hose, put the wrench on first, then reattach the hose, and now it should be a lot easier to get it undone. Now we can see some of that old fluid starting to come out already. Now you just want to sit in the front of your car and pump your brakes to get all that old fluid out. Make sure to check your master cylinder frequently so that the cylinder doesn't run dry. You can see the old fluid right there. Certainly not as black as the stuff that was in the master cylinder though. Now you can see the fluid was a lot cleaner when it was coming out, and just from doing it that little bit, the level has already gone down quite a bit. So again, make sure that you're checking this frequently to make sure that you don't let it run dry and introduce air into the system. Once the fluid's nice and clean and you don't see any more bubbles coming out when you're pumping, you can go ahead and tighten up the nut and move on to the next brake. So now we're set up here on the driver's side rear wheel, and we've already got it cracked open. But just a little tip for you guys, if you are having trouble getting enough leverage to open up the bleeder valve, what you can do is take this close end right here, match it up to the open side of the other crescent wrench, and if you put it in like this, you can see it kind of locks up in there. And then it gives you more leverage to be able to open that up. So again, if you're having trouble, if it seems stuck, then use the closed side with the open side and see if you have any luck with that. And from the driver's view, literally all you're doing is just continually depressing the brakes like that to push all the old fluid out. Again, make sure to check your master cylinder very frequently as you're doing this. Now we're at the passenger front wheel, and you can see the brake line coming in right here. There's the bleeder valve, and we've already got everything set up ready to go. And really all you have to do is the exact same procedure for this wheel, or this brake, and the driver's side brake. Once you're done, top up your master cylinder again. You want to make sure to wipe off any of this brake fluid if it spills out as soon as possible, because it's pretty nasty stuff. And you are done. Now you can sit back and enjoy however much bourbon you have left. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to check out my video on how to replace calipers and rotors. Hit the like and subscribe button if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys next time.